Want to learn about public policy with a group of curious fellow learners? Apply for the 12-week graduate certificate in public policy. Early bird deadline closes 27th July.
Welcome to All Things Policy, a daily podcast by the Takshashila Institution. We are a bunch of policy nerds based in Bengaluru, and we like bringing fresh perspectives to Indian affairs and Indian perspectives to global affairs. So grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and join us for today's chat.
Hi, welcome to today's episode of All Things Policy. I'm Adya, your host for the day, and I'm going to be speaking to Aniket and Yusuf, both from Takshashila, about India's defense sector. With Operation Sindoor and a lot of current events, defense has been the talk of the town, but there's a lack of understanding as to what exactly is going on. Today, we're going to be talking about imports, indigenization, procurement, and just try and delve into exactly what India's defense sector looks like, the components, the strengths, the weaknesses, and what the way forward is. Yusuf, I'm so glad to have you here. Aniket, likewise.
Thanks, Arya. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Yeah.
So just to start off, I think we all know that for many years now, India has been a leading importer of arms globally. I just wanted to know what the two of you thought on the current trends in our defense imports. Are we seeing a shift in the type and volume of military hardware being sourced from abroad? And what does that say? How does that translate into our combat readiness, and how have those imports fared in recent affairs?
Look, we are the second largest or maybe the largest importer of arms even now. What has happened is over the last few years, we have shifted from buying a lot of Russian equipment towards Western equipment, and that doesn't come cheap. So if you've seen, we bought Rafale, we have bought a lot of aircraft from the US, the P-8s, we bought C-130s, we bought Apache helicopters, we bought the MH-60 Romeo helicopter for the Navy, et cetera, et cetera. So, and those don't come cheap. So we have shifted out from Russia to buy such equipment from the West. And what is happening, perhaps as we see in the last few years, is some of the equipment that we are buying from Russia are now made in India. We have developed technologies which has allowed us to make indigenous weapons, especially if you look at our air defense system, which performed wonderfully well in the recent war with Pakistan. Not only the air defense system, but whole networking of air defense system, that worked very well for us. Even now we're making our light tanks, that's our own. We are making howitzers, those are our own. Earlier we imported the Bofors ones, but now we have our own artillery. Rocket launchers, we have been manufacturing Pinaka for a very long time now, so we are self-sufficient in that one. So what has happened is the Russian content in terms of the percentage, which used to be nearly 3/4 of our imports, is now down to about 30-odd%. And France, Israel, and US have taken away that share. But still, in terms of volumes, we are up there in terms of being the top importer of weapons. But our indigenous weapon system, which have been in the development for the last 20 years, have matured. And now not only it is good for us, I think we are export ready as well for some of our weapon system. And it has already happened. We have cracked certain deals in recent times that we can go ahead in the future part of our conversation. If Aniket needs to join that, please.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree with Yusuf. We were one of the largest arms importers in the world. We made up essentially 8 to 9% of the global arms imports. And, when we look at our Navy, our Air Force, or our Army, large pieces of equipment, as Yusuf mentioned, are, originating from Russia, whether it is, our warships, where we have had Russian frigates from the Talwar class come in, or our very own Sukhoi 30 MKI, which is also Russian in nature. So definitely we have had a lot of Russian tech. Along with that, we have had France and the US come and play their major roles. So we have had our fair share of imports, but as Yusuf mentioned as well, we have definitely shifted towards indigenization. with the most recent warship induction that we had just 2 days back, that marked the last Russian frigate to come in, and the Indian Navy clarified that we would not be importing any more warships into our navy. So it already shows signs of our navy moving towards indigenization, and at the same time, we have already started manufacturing a lot of these weapons and equipment within the country as well. So that helps us avoid the supply chain risk. So yeah, absolutely, I do believe that we
On
have.
those warships, I was opposed to those warships. We bought four of those from Russia. There were two mothballed hulls waiting over there, which did not have engines because because they attacked Crimea. This is in 2014, and Ukraine refused to supply the Zoria engines for them. It was just because India intervened. That's how the engines were delivered, and two of them are going to be made in India. We didn't need to do this. We have our own frigates, the Shivalik class and the Follow Nilgiri class. I mean, I didn't know why we had to buy this. It's not as if we don't have capacity to make more warships. We have spare capacity. We could have made it, but anyway, that's a different question. But it's good that we're not going to import any more warships. But even these four warships didn't have to be. I think we just did a favor to the Russia to buy those two hulls, which were just probably rusting.
Of course. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you, Yusuf. And, I mean, I had my fair share of questions regarding the INS Vikramaditya as well, which was a Kiev class cruiser that we got in from Russia. But of course, our requirements depend on obviously whatever capabilities we require. So regarding the Vikramaditya, it played as a transition medium for us, while the INS Virat and the previous INS Vikrant were obviously being commissioned out. So yeah.
Okay, thank you for that, Yusuf and Aniket. Another question I had was, India's defense procurement process has often been described as very, very complex. And I wanted to understand what the most significant recent changes have been to this process. I mean, especially the defense acquisition procedure. Do you think these reforms are succeeding in streamlining procurement and encouraging indigenous participation, or do you not see them as particularly successful?
No, as we speak, the government has decided to change how we procure. So they are going to suggest changes to the 2020 Defense Procurement Plan, acquisition plan procedure, and that's in the way, in the works as to how we do it, so that you can cut short some of the long timelines that happen, how we approve, how we go about evaluating things. It still remains a lot of pain. Even in terms of private participation, the defense acquisition procedure has been a hindrance, actually, rather than encouraging. Um, Things like the strategic partnership model, which they came up, under which there were certain programs, including the submarine program. It didn't just take off just because the clauses are such that it's a deterrent for any private sector company to invest money in. The DPSUs can get away with murder, practically, so to speak, because there's nothing. But the clauses of penalties are such which a private enterprise would just sink in. So they would not take the risk. That kept the private sector out. So even now, if you see, I mean, the submarine order has gone to MDL. It did not go to L&T, which was the other contender. But that's for some other reasons. But still, we need to have these procedures in place which encourage, which is fair in terms of how it treats all companies. And just because it's a government company, it can get away. I mean, who you penalize? But you penalize your own taxpayers, right? If you penalize a defense public sector enterprise. So we still have a problem, but it's in the works now. We'll see what changes they bring to streamline, to make it more fair, make it more efficient. I'm not going to hold my breath, given the history of our procurement processes, but I hope things change for the better.
Okay, great, Yusuf. Thanks. When we talk about procurement, a major factor is obviously military readiness and modernization. What exactly does modernization mean in today's landscape? And how are we balancing the need for state of the art military tech, often acquired through imports, with this long term goal of achieving self reliance in defense? And all this talk about modernization, could you also tell me what particular technologies you think are important to prioritize at this juncture?
Look, the armed forces have a certain criteria as to what the force structure will look like. Where a certain percentage of the weaponry is going to be state of the art, a certain percentage is going to be top class, and others are going to be legacy systems, which would be upgraded and made sure that they're relevant for the times. You can't have an entire force structure which is state of the art. It's very difficult. It's going to be very expensive, and the upgrades take a long time. And inducting new equipment with newest technologies also take a lot of time. But you need to fight a war whenever you have to fight one. I mean, we didn't expect to fight a war with Pakistan, but it did happen, and we had to fight with whatever we have. And the best part over here was with our air defenses, we were able to network our legacy system. So something which is World War II vintage, networked with our advanced system, and all working in tandem beautifully. And that is how we were able to shoot down so many of their drones and missiles and things like that. So I think the way that we probably look at is how best we can utilize all our equipment and see how we can leverage technology in terms of networking, maybe in terms of how we deploy artificial intelligence that help us use our legacy system to the best that we can. you know I think this is where we won in this war with Pakistan. We were able to network our legacy systems, including man pads, man portable air defense system, where they have these electronic things installed on them, and they were able to delegate as to who engages at which target, and this was good. And if you look at the other side, they had these probably the top Chinese equipment, but they didn't talk to each other, or they were not as well networked, and we were able to take them out. Apart from their aerial engagement, which was well networked with the AWACS and their other systems. But if you look at Akash Tir, which is what I'm talking about, it was networked the whole thing well, and we were able to defend ourselves well. So yeah, it's going to be a mix of legacy good systems and the state of the art systems.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with Yusuf on that. And, if there's one thing that we observed in Operation Sindoor, it was the brilliant way that not only our air defenses, but our Air Force also showcased its combat capabilities and achieved their required goals. So, Yusuf, actually, I had a question for you on this topic as well, because I mean, we've been hearing a lot about, upgrades in the Navy and the Air Force, like our Sukhoi 30 is going through the Super Sukhoi upgrade, and our Navy is obviously getting more and more advanced. The most recent Vishakhapatnam class destroyer, INS Surat, had AI integrated into its combat systems. I wanted to ask you about our armored forces, specifically our tanks. We have the T-72s and the T-90 Bhishmas. On that note, I mean, we have witnessed these tanks take place in the combat in Ukraine, and there have been very conflicting reports regarding how the T-90 specifically has performed, and even the T-72. So, do you think that we should also, have a strong focus now on our tank fleet, try to upgrade them as much as possible, given that Pakistan already imports and has help of China when it comes to manufacturing these tanks?
Look, we have our own technologies, but it didn't come through, unfortunately. The Arjun tanks. We have the next generation of tanks, the program, but as with many of our things, it's slow. Upgrades of T90s, sure. What we have to look for is how drones are now countering tanks, and how we can come up with systems which can counter these things. Because Pakistan has access to a lot of these Chinese drones, and we saw that during Operation Sindoor, they fired hundreds of drones on India, and they were targeting our cities. But it's the nature of warfare. How do we visualize the next warfare? In this 4-day conflict, we saw that everything was at standoff distances. We're not looking to invade into each other's territory, and using weapons at long distances, we were able to inflict a lot of damage. Even if you see what Ukraine did in Russia very recently, where they had drones set up inside Russian territory, they were smuggled in over a period of time, over several months, in complete secrecy, and then they were able to take out Russian bases, 4 Russian bases, and it caused huge damage. Where it was able to take out a lot of these strategic bombers, the Tu-95s and Tu-22s and even Tu-60s. So the nature of warfare is what we have to envision. How are we going to fight the next war? We got an example in our current war where we always used to say that Indian armed forces are preparing to fight previous century's war, but their armed forces have fought a 21st century war, and we did well. I'm sure we're going to learn from it and only get better in terms of how we visualize the next war and get ready in terms of equipment. But I think we have to say that we have been tardy with our defense acquisition. We were just a while back talking about our navy. Our navy was to get 200 warships strong by 2027, and this was envisioned, say, about 7, 8, 10 years back. That by 2027 we'll have 200 warships. That was cut to 175, and even then we were sure not to make it to that number, and then we revised that timeline to somewhere around 2034, 2035. It's a very, very slow progress, and in times when the Chinese navy is really ramping up, it's now the largest navy in terms of numbers, although maybe not in tonnage, but they are churning out warships like as if we manufacture just clothes. I mean, they're so rapid in manufacturing warships, and they are foraying into our area, Indian Ocean. They are sending their surveillance ships. They are mapping the entire Bay of Bengal, around Andamans and things like that, so that they know how to operate their submarines in our area. And they've been masking their operations, even submarine operations in our territory, in our region, not a territory, but in our region, saying that this is anti-piracy operations. Nobody uses submarines for anti-piracy. But anyway, those are international waters. You can't do much. But the point is, they are coming into this region, and we will require the force structure to counter it. So it's a very tardy pace of development. A lot of our programs have been very slow. As of now, we don't have a single destroyer lined up, next generation destroyer. Nothing is under production right now. Submarines, P-75I, we're nowhere yet. I mean, yes, MDL has signed this deal with the ThyssenKrupp, and we're going to have next submarine. But still, that's a long way away. We're just at a stocking stage. So our Navy has suffered in the last few years. And that's not a good thing. As you see, the globe, as we see it today, is in disorder. The world is in disorder. There are conflicts, and you need a very strong navy to have that level of force projection that is required across the region. And we have to remember that we have a lot of our citizens all over the world, and sometimes you need to pull them out once there is a conflict. And navy plays a very important role in many of these areas. So this is one. Our Air Force, again, we have been lacking. Our force level is down to about 30 squadrons, and even within those 30 squadrons, some of them are very old aircraft. We have, I think, 2 or 3 squadrons of MiG-21s even still in service. Our Jaguars are old. Our MiG-29s are old. So basically what we have right now are, if you want to say these are our top line fighters, we have Sukhoi 30s, which are about 270, 36 Rafales, and I think about 50 Mirage. This is our force level if we want to go to war. LCAs are coming along, but they're not in large numbers, and also they're not the Mk1A versions. They're still the older ones. Few of them are initial operation IOC variants, 20 are FOC variants, and the Mk1As are yet to come. So the Air Force is struggling. The MRFA program, again, which has come up for 114 aircraft. We don't know how that is going to go. Our neighbors to the north, well, they have a couple of 5th generation fighters, a couple of 6th generation fighters are already in development. They are showcasing it. Pakistan may get the J-35s from China. I'm sure it's not fully 5th generation, but they're going to be at least a half a generation up from India. So if you look at our entire modernization, because that's the topic, that's the question you ask, Adya, how are we going in terms of a modernization? I would say we are in serious trouble in that regard. So as our forces generally say, we'll fight with what we have, that's what we do. But we are struggling in terms of numbers for our Navy and for our Air Force.
Great. Okay. I mean, well, not great. That's actually really scary to hear. But, well, considering the challenges with our modernization, then especially trying to keep up with 5th gen and 6th gen aircraft in other countries, Could you tell me a little bit about our defense suppliers and whether this landscape has changed and what exactly we import from them? What is our priority in terms of our imports?
So, in terms of certain components, say Israel is in terms of subsystems. Israel is a number one in terms of electronics, sensors. If you look at something like a targeting pod that comes from Israel, helmets for the aircraft, fighter aircraft, for helmet mounted display come from Israel. Um, some of our missiles come from their air defense system. The Barak system has come from Israel. So these are the things that come from Israel. From France, obviously, it's the Rafale. Apart from that, they do have their. I mean, along with Rafale comes their missiles like Scalp, which we used in Operation Sindoor. With France, we also get our engines for our helicopter fleet, which is the DLH, the Troof, and the subsequent the newer ones, which are going to come up with a multi-role helicopter that is also going to use a French engine. From the US, we get all the kind of aircraft that we can't get from elsewhere. Say, for instance, we bought the C-17s. It's no longer in production, and boy, we need more of those. If only we had ordered in time when the production line was still running, we would have had a larger fleet, and it would have been very useful. C-130s, for instance, again, US. Apache helicopters, again, it can be debatable. We have our own Prachand LCH. Do we we would probably would put more money into that rather than buying the Apache. But we've already got a delivery of them. I think the Army variant is yet to come. What else have we bought? We bought P8 again for maritime awareness, and also it can take out submarines, and it's a very very effective aircraft. And not only that, we have connected ourselves with our partners in the Indo-Pacific, Australia, Japan, where we can share information and create this maritime domain awareness. So these are the aircraft which we can't source from elsewhere. We don't have any capability to manufacture them in India. There is no Russian equivalent. Europe also there is no equivalent. So there are certain things that we bought from America which were good buys. Rest of the things that we can do are indigenous, like artillery. We spoke about this artillery. In fact, this is an exportable item for us now. We have already have success in this regard. We have exported to Armenia. Um, you know, from Ukraine war, one of the most sought after commodity was a 155 mm shell, and we can do that, right? Manufacture a lot of 155 mm shells and export it to the world, the Europeans, to the Americans, to backfill an amount of exports that they have done or supplies they have given to Ukraine to fill their armory back. So there are possibilities from India that we can look at for exports. We have exported BrahMos to Philippines. I think Indonesia is in talks. Vietnam forever has been in talks, but the BrahMos is a well developed system, and now combat proven, as we saw with Operation Sindoor. A lot of the runways were taken out using BrahMos. So we have a various range of products which are exportable now. We just need to find the customers.
Okay. We've been talking about other countries and our imports for a while. I want to shift the focus inwards now. Considering that we're still trying to fill some critical technology gaps that we're primarily addressing through imports, could you tell me what the hurdles are in our own domestic production system? Why do we have to look elsewhere for some of these technologies? What's wrong with our own system? Why are we not able to produce as per our necessities?
Well, one is the advanced nature of weaponry, right? We may not have all the technologies. For instance, look at the engine. We have signed a deal with GE to supply F414. They're going to transfer the technology to India, and we're going to make them over here. We've been trying for at least 2 decades now to develop our own engine, and that didn't head anywhere. It's our fault that we did not, invest enough. About 2,600 crores over 20 years for an engine is nothing. Whereas China has spent billions and billions of dollars, I think 20 odd billion dollars in developing aero engines. These are not easy technologies. It has, we find it difficult to get the metallurgy right. For instance, which is a very critical element in a jet engine. We for a long time we did not have the technology to make our own barrels for guns. And the Russians, when they sold us the T-90 tanks, they denied us the technology transfer for the barrels. So metallurgy is a very key element. Defense, even production technologies have to be. You may develop the best of technologies in terms of a product, but you need good manufacturing technologies as well. So some of the machineries that are required, all those play a critical role. We have been assembling these weapons for a long time, right? From 1960s onwards with the MiGs and things like that. We have been assembling their engines, but still we have not got our own engine. So either a lack of capability in understanding those technologies and replicating them uh, is perhaps one of the ways. The other thing is we are completely DPSU dependent. I would repeatedly highlight that point because our private sector has not got in a big way into our defense production. That where the profit motive is not the motivating factor, where you have job security in the DPSUs and long timelines and no accountability, they're not going to produce the kind of systems that we need. But the private sector, which has to, is either they make it or they sink, there is a greater motivation for them to do whatever it takes to succeed. And that is perhaps what we need to do going forward, where increasingly our private sector gets involved. We are going to see that with the AMCA, which is a fifth generation fighter. Hopefully they will set the right policies where the private sector gets into manufacturing the entire fighter aircraft. Subsystems will come from all over the world, including the engine, which is going to be the GE414. But now we have a lot of these domestic systems suppliers, which then can be integrated onto this aircraft. But we need the private sector, and I think that I hope the policies are right, because as we saw with the earlier versions in the DAP 2020 with the strategic partnership, the clauses over there were very. I wouldn't invest, as someone who has very limited capital, and you want to put it into places where it'll give you maximum returns, not risk it so badly.
Yeah, I just wanted to add on when we're talking about defense industries as a whole. I mean, when we look at the American defense industry, which is the biggest in the world, you look at these companies like Lockheed Martin and Northrop Grumman. I think one thing that also comes with these massive defense industries is also the ability to shape narratives. And during conflict times, I mean, as we witnessed, whether it is Israel, Iran, or what happened with India, Pakistan, was that when disinformation is flowing everywhere, on especially on social media sites like Twitter, etc. One thing that has been this sort of overplaying, American equipment in particular. The way the media has reported on the way these American fighter jets, or when you look at India, Pakistan, for example, where Pakistan uses the F-16 Raptor, F-16 Fighting Falcon, which is a American fighter jet that they got in the 70s or the 80s. Even when Pulwama took place and we engaged in the Balkot airstrikes, there was just complete denial that their fighter jets were shot down. And while, of course, evidence obviously in the end comes in and can shape narratives, I think one thing that plays a critical role is just the fact that these defense industries that you see from country to country, they really shape perceptions worldwide. So from that point, I think one good thing with Operation Sindoor, with the way the Akash missile performed, the way our various fighter jets in our air force performed, it greatly benefited our own indigenous defense industry. And I think, and this brings me to the next question, Yusuf, that I wanted to ask you as well. I'm sure that after this, we expect countries to line up for acquiring these various combat systems as well. Like you mentioned, the BrahMos missile is one. We already export the Pinaka and the Akash missiles to Armenia, and there's unofficial reports going on that we are also potentially considering long-range land attack cruise missiles to Greece. So are we expecting to see a sudden jump in exports now and potentially cross the $5 to $6 billion export mark that we had set for around 2029, 2030? Do you think that we can potentially cross that mark?
Look, I don't think anybody's going to line up. But what we have done is we have shown the world that we have certain systems which are very capable. Defense exports are also part of diplomacy. It's a strategic tool, and we have to play that game. So talk with our friendly countries. I mean, one of the countries who we must approach, say for our air defense system, is say UAE. We have very good ties with them, and they're very rich, and they would have seen these missiles flying from Iran, and I'm sure our network, not just our the air defense missiles, but the whole networking, the Akash T system itself, can be an exportable item for us. So it's not a question of anybody lining up. I'm sure they will express interest, but I think we need to be more proactive. So defense diplomacy should be very much part of our toolkit. And that gives us certain advantage also in terms of the influence that we can have with those countries. I think the war has given us that validation that there are certain systems that we can export, and now it's going to be about how we map out those countries which can be potential, and especially at a time when budgets for defense expenditure, although people are looking at the Europeans are looking at 5% thanks to Trump. uh, but the rest of the world, they are tight, and especially with this economy, the global economy, in a bit of rough weather, especially with the post-Trump tariffs and things like that. We offer very competitive weapon systems compared to what the West offers. So our air defense systems, our tanks, even our helicopters, all these can be far cheaper than the Western systems, and this is where we can gain and market access into global South markets. We're going to face China over there, but now at least we have combat proven. China does not have any combat proven equipment. We have combat proven equipment that we can showcase.
Thanks, Yusuf. Just, I had a final question for both of you. I think lately, especially with Operation Sindoor, we've seen how drones have become integral to what warfare looks like today. I wanted to ask, going forward, as emerging technologies become more and more integrated with the defense sector, what do you think the priority areas would be for us to focus on in terms of India's security environment as well as our strategic needs?
You mentioned drones. It's a very critical area. Um, uh, we've seen with the Ukraine war how they have utilized all kinds of drones, from small, $500 drones to, the more expensive ones. But these $500 to $1,000 drones are the ones which took out Russian, bomber fleet. So that is one. Uh, you know, the Shahid drones, which Iran supplied to Russia, and now Russia is making them on their own inside Russia, they've been very effective as well. And what we're looking at, the trend is that not only with the drones, but every weapon system, countries are looking at low cost, high impact systems. Drones have become those low cost, high impact systems where, a small drone can take out a tank, a small drone can take out a strategic bomber. And this is where India will also have to invest in. We have a drone industry, a drone ecosystem coming up, but I think there are red flags over there where certain companies which have got into this space are just doing assembly work, where some of the critical subsystems from there in those drones come from China. And we've had an instance flagged where our drones went off their path, and we think that this could be some kind of control happening from the other side, because those drones would have Chinese parts in them, and that is a problem for us. So going forward, we have to look at indigenous drone technologies where everything in the drone is Indian. It's not definitely not China. No part of China in it, and these can be cheap drones. I mean, we were looking to buy the Predators, right? It's 30 of them coming at $3 billion, $100 million each. We saw what happened in the war with Pakistan. It's a very highly contested airspace. If that is contested, imagine what the China front is going to be. And these are $100 million drones. It's going to be a lot of heartburn for us, burning holes into our pockets if these are shot down. And the US MQ-9s have been shot down, not and by Houthis. I mean, they are not even, a world-class air force with world-class stuff, but they have managed to shoot down MQ-9s of the US. So what we need to look at is cost-effective solutions which can be homegrown, An example is the Turkish TB2 drone, which is cheap, I think about $2 million, and they mass produce it, and you can practically create walls of these drones from anywhere between the small drones, which cost $500 or $1,000, to say, 1 lakh rupees, 50,000 rupees, whatever, going all the way to some $2 million drone. But to buy $100 million drone, first of all, you can't buy in large numbers, and it's definitely going to get shot down because our enemies' airspace is contested. So we need to look at more cost-effective systems, but high impact. Use technology. AI is one of them. Although I oppose autonomous systems, I mean that's a strict no-no for me. We need to regulate that. But in terms of how we can deploy certain systems, we need to think in that regard. But drones definitely are going to be a way forward.
Okay, thank you so much for that. That was a really interesting conversation, and I'm sure it'll give us I'll give our listeners also a lot to think about. Thank you.
Thanks, Adya. Thanks so much. Thanks, Aniket.
Thank you. Thank you, Yusuf. Thank you.
If you liked our show, dive into Takshashila's research on technology, strategy, and economic affairs. Check us out at our Twitter handle @Takshashila INST or our website takshashila.org.in.